In the quiet suburbs of Kansas, where the streets are lined with maple trees and neighbors greet each other by name, a young girl once believed she lived the perfect American dream. Her father was steady, reliable, and deeply respected. A church president, a Cub Scout leader, and a man who took pride in his lawn. Her mother was gentle, her home filled with structure and love. To the outside world, they were the model of a good family. That girl's name is Kerri Rawson. And her father was Dennis Rader, the man the world would come to know as the BTK Killer. For most of her life, Kerri had no idea that the man who tucked her into bed at night was hiding one of the darkest secrets in American crime history. She loved him deeply, trusted him completely, and saw him as the example of what a strong father should be. But behind his carefully built image of faith and responsibility, her father was living a double life. To his community, Dennis Rader was a family man. To the police, he was a ghost. And to his victims, he was a nightmare that would define Wichita's history forever. For over 30 years, the BTK Killer haunted Kansas. His name, BTK, stood for bind, torture, kill, a phrase he invented himself, used in the letters he sent to the media and law enforcement, taunting them with his crimes. Between 1974 and 1991, 10 innocent lives were taken. And all the while, his family remained unaware of what was happening behind closed doors. At home, he was disciplined but affectionate. He kept his house in perfect order, his tools arranged with precision, his routines consistent down to the minute. He believed in control, in rules, in consequences, and in maintaining appearances. That same need for control defined everything he did, both as a father and as a killer. Kerri remembers her childhood as ordinary, even happy. She recalls fishing trips, helping her dad wash the car, and sitting beside him in church every Sunday. He wasn't affectionate in a soft way, but he showed love through structure and stability. To her, that was love. He was the center of her world. But in February 2005, that world came crashing down. Kerri was newly married, living far from home, when her phone rang. It was the call that changed everything. The voice on the other end said her father had been arrested, accused of being the BTK Killer. At first, she thought it was a cruel joke or a mistake. Her father, a serial killer? It didn't make sense. But as she turned on the news and saw his face flash across the screen, reality set in. Her father's name, Dennis Rader, was now headline news across the country. The evidence was undeniable. DNA samples matched crime scenes. The floppy disks he had mailed to a local TV station had been traced back to his church computer. Every clue pointed to him. Kerri's heart broke in ways words couldn't express. She later described that moment as the floor falling out from under her. The man who raised her was suddenly the man the world despised. Her protector had become a monster to everyone else. In interviews, she said, "It felt like I lost my father, my home, and my identity, all at once." In the days that followed, the news exploded. Reporters filled the streets. Satellite vans parked outside her childhood home. Neighbors stood in disbelief. The Rader name, once respected, had become infamous overnight. And Kerri, just 26 at the time, had to face the world as the daughter of the BTK Killer. Everywhere she turned, people stared. Some pitied her. Others blamed her. But the hardest part wasn't the public reaction. It was the private war inside her heart. She loved her father. She couldn't stop loving him. That love didn't disappear, even when the truth did. She remembered the way he smiled, the way he protected her, the way he encouraged her to succeed. And yet, she also knew what he had done, the lives he had taken, the pain he had caused. How do you reconcile those two versions of the same person? How do you love a father who destroyed so many other families? That question became the foundation of Kerri's life from that day forward. As her father confessed in court, his words stunned everyone. Calm, emotionless, precise, Dennis Rader described each crime in chilling detail, speaking as if he were reading a grocery list. Kerri couldn't watch it live. She stayed away, choosing not to see the man she once adored describe unspeakable things with no trace of remorse. When the judge sentenced him to 10 consecutive life terms, the world celebrated justice. But for Kerri, there was no celebration. There was only grief, not for the man the world hated, but for the father she had lost long before she knew it. In the months after the arrest, Kerri withdrew from public life. She hid from cameras, changed her name, and avoided anyone who might recognize her. Every knock on the door made her heart race. Every phone call made her anxious. She felt like a prisoner in her own life. The trauma ran deep. She struggled with nightmares, guilt, and questions that had no answers. Why didn't she notice? Were there signs she ignored? Was she somehow responsible for not seeing the truth? But the truth was simple. Dennis Rader had fooled everyone. His mask of normalcy was perfect. He blended into society so completely that even his own daughter, who knew him better than anyone, couldn't see the darkness beneath. Years passed, and Kerri tried to rebuild her life. She focused on healing, on faith, and on understanding what it meant to forgive someone who didn't deserve forgiveness. For a long time, she refused to speak to her father. But eventually, she began writing letters, not out of love, but out of a need to understand. She wanted answers. She wanted to know how he could separate the man she loved from the monster he became. He wrote back, often quoting scripture, talking about faith and redemption, rarely showing remorse. But even in his twisted logic, Kerri found clarity. She realized she couldn't fix him, but she could heal herself. Through therapy, prayer, and writing, she began to find peace. Slowly, the shame and confusion that once controlled her started to fade. In 2019, she released her book, A Serial Killer's Daughter, My Story of Faith, Love, and Overcoming. It became a national bestseller. But more importantly, it became her way of reclaiming her voice. The book wasn't about the crimes. It wasn't about sensational headlines or horror. It was about survival, about what it means to live in the shadow of evil and still find light. In her book and interviews, Kerri spoke openly about her struggle with forgiveness. She said, "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace over pain." Those words became her mission. She started speaking publicly at events for trauma survivors and crime victim families. She used her story to show others that healing is possible, even after unimaginable betrayal. Behind every infamous criminal, she reminded people, are families left to pick up the pieces. Parents, children, and spouses who live with scars they didn't create. For Kerri, the journey wasn't just about surviving her father's truth, it was about redefining who she was beyond it. She wasn't the daughter of BTK anymore. She was a survivor, a writer, a woman who turned pain into purpose. Even today, she occasionally writes to her father. Their relationship is complicated, distant, and cautious. She doesn't excuse his actions. She never will. But she chooses not to let hate define her. In interviews, when asked why she still communicates with him, she said, "Because he's still my father. And I can't let what he did erase who I am." Her ability to face him, even from a distance, shows a strength few could imagine. Over time, Kerri became a voice for those who live in silence, the invisible victims of violent crimes. She speaks of resilience, of faith, and of learning to live again after the world you knew has been destroyed. Her story isn't one of horror, it's one of transformation. From the daughter of a killer to the author of her own healing. When she looks back now, she says she doesn't see only pain. She also sees survival. She sees the little girl who loved her father, and the woman who had the courage to face his truth. The story of Kerri Rawson is not about BTK. It's about what happens when evil tries to break something good, and fails. Because even though Dennis Rader will spend the rest of his life behind bars, his daughter's voice will continue to rise above the darkness he created. Her story reminds us that no matter how deep the pain, healing is always possible. That forgiveness is not weakness, it's power. And that sometimes, the strongest people are those who never ask to be strong at all. After the first interviews, Kerri Rawson realized that speaking about her father, Dennis Rader, the BTK Killer, wasn't reopening a wound, it was reclaiming her life. Every question came back to the same impossible thought: how could you not have known? Her answer was always calm. Her father wasn't a monster in plain sight. He was the man who tucked her in at night, who prayed with her before bed. Evil hid inside an ordinary home, behind a mask of normalcy. After the 2005 arrest, Kerri tried to disappear. She changed jobs, moved states, avoided cameras. But silence didn't heal her, it trapped her. Years later she decided to write A Serial Killer's Daughter, not to defend her father, but to understand how to live after such betrayal. The book became a message of survival, Proof that victims aren't always strangers, sometimes they share your last name. Forgiveness became her hardest lesson. Kerri says forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, it means refusing to let another person's darkness rule your future. She began speaking publicly about trauma and healing, helping others who lived with family secrets or inherited shame. She still writes letters to her father. Some she never sends, others go straight to his prison cell in Kansas. Her words are boundaries, not bridges, reminders that she can acknowledge his existence without accepting his excuses. His replies often arrive filled with scripture and attempts to rewrite history, but she no longer reads them for answers. She reads them to confirm how different they've become. Occasionally, she visits him behind glass. No drama, no tears, just distance. The man who once controlled every moment of her childhood now asks polite questions about her children. She says it feels like talking to a ghost that still breathes. Outside prison walls, Kerri lives quietly. She hikes, writes, and teaches others that trauma doesn't have to define them. She says, "If I stay silent, then he wins." Every time she speaks publicly, she reclaims power he once held. The world still calls her the BTK Killer's daughter, but she's turned that label into strength. To her, it means surviving the unthinkable, choosing love and light over fear. When true crime documentaries replay her family's story, she doesn't see a headline, she sees her own fight to rebuild a normal life. She often reminds audiences that evil doesn't wear a warning sign. It hides in plain sight, behind polite smiles and Sunday clothes. Her mission now is to help others recognize pain, talk about it, and heal before it consumes them. Kerri admits she still has nightmares about the day she learned the truth. But instead of running from those memories, she faces them. That's her victory. Her father took lives. She's using hers to restore them. Today, she speaks for survivors everywhere, proof that your bloodline doesn't decide your destiny. The story isn't about the BTK killer anymore. It's about the woman who found her voice and refused to live in his shadow.